welcome everyone. Who here traveled from out of town to come here? Wow, thank you. Out of the country to come here. Okay. All right, well, that's also pretty much different continents. So, okay, we're not going to ask that question. Well, thanks, everyone. I think I already said it yesterday, but we're really, really grateful that you made all the way here. And we're hoping to make your time worth it. I think if we try to pay you in consulting fees to come for like 2 days and spend time with Foresight, I think, yeah, I mean, it would be beyond our budget. And so we're really, really we appreciate all of you guys here. You bring a lot of brain power and a lot of care for the sector. And we're going to try to make our time worth your time. And for that, I just want to welcome you all. This is going to be pretty informal. We're going to start with a few lightning talks, but then I really, welcome you to make yourself at home. Foresight events. But for whom here is it their first Foresight event? Hand up. Okay, a few people as well. Okay, so then everyone else who here has been to a Foresight event before. So those are the people that will take you by their hand, and I think you will quickly figure out that it's a pretty informal bunch, and that we're really all here to help each other. So welcome you to, just be yourselves. And, if you have requests, if you have comments throughout this event, please let me know. We're here to switch things about. Okay, cool. So we're going to do introductions and sponsorship intros, where basically every one of you is going to say a quick word about you and about what you need and what you can provide over lunch. So already start thinking of if you had a moment to ask someone for help, what would you like to ask them about? And we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Foresight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the workshop. Then we're going to jump right into the first talks. And then over lunch, we're going to do a little, a pretty participant guided a few sessions. We're going to do a few more lightning talks, and then we're going to get into group formation. But for now, I will tell you a little bit about what it is that Foresight is about. So basically, in a nutshell, we were founded in 1986, so quite some time ago. And we were founded on this promise of long-term technological progress and the beneficial futures that this can unlock. We do a few different topic interest areas. You are currently in this one, intelligent cooperation. We also do molecular machines, so we were founded on the long-term vision of molecular nanotechnology. And basically, what could we build if we could really build things with atomic precision? We have a very strong interest in biotech and health extension too. We focus always on the outside bits and pieces that are a little bit too fringe for legacy institutional founders to take on. So here we do cryonics, some reprogramming, rejuvenation technologies, and so forth. For newer technologies, we focus mostly on brain-computer interface and whole brain emulations, also in relation to AI safety. So we have a workshop coming up for that next year with Anders Sandberg, who wrote the whole brain emulation roadmap in 2007. And so we're going to do a revamp. For space technologies, we focus a little bit on the early stage bits like asteroid mining, and then some more theoretical question long-term. And existential hope is for us kind of the track in which we try to round all of these technologies up towards positive futures. You are currently in the intelligent cooperation track. And so our approach to computing, where we think maybe we have somewhat of a comparative advantage, is really trying to figure out what could it mean if we have more decentralized approaches to computing, what could it mean if we have privacy preserving approaches to computing, and where do crypto security and AI meet, and what futures could this unlock? And so that is what we're trying to figure out really, I think, throughout this workshop here today as well. So thanks so much for coming. We have in these areas always virtual seminars, and they run once monthly. And I can say a little bit more about that later. We have fellowships, prizes, and then we have workshops like this. And so once a month in each of these once a year in each of these tracks, we try to bring everyone together, and we try to really work on the long-term problems in these spaces. So that's why you guys are all here. And to say a few more words perhaps about the workshop and what you can expect. Really, really happy to be hosted here by 50 Years. Thank you so much, Ale and team, for hosting us. It's such a joy. And yeah, we look forward. We look forward to hearing much more about 50 Years and what you're focused on. We've had the pleasure of collaborating on a lot of events, and there's a really strong, I think, intersection, and really, really happy for Protocol Labs also for making this possible, and for Agoric, and I look forward to hearing much more from you guys as well over lunch. So thanks very much for making this happen. I really appreciate it. Okay, cool. You have like a handout with participants. All of these participants, if you go on the website, you can basically click their names and you can click through to the bio. You will hear also more from all of you guys over lunch, but we have a really, really wonderful crowd here. And yeah, I really welcome you to see this crowd as your kind of like group of around 60 people that are your collaborators that you'd like to really like, yeah, for this one weekend at least, have pretty ambitious goals with. So what are we doing here? Why are we here? In a nutshell, I will say a little bit about this in my intro talk, but to kind of sum this up, we're really trying to spend these 2 days to advance cooperation at the intersection of cryptography, security, and AI. So we think that this intersection is still relatively nascent, but could be really pretty important for beneficial long-term futures. And we're having a few areas here that we really are trying to explore. So if I can give you like 3 prompts to think about, and obviously some people are also working on other bits, but they are like, how can your tools, all the tools that you are working on, help civilization cooperate better? How can your tools help civilization defend itself better? And how can your tools help civilization do both in light of artificial intelligence? And so these are, I think, 3 interesting prompts to just kind of like run through your head as we are going to be moving into today's working groups as well. In terms of format, we're going to have short presentations. And so here on the agenda, you find 3 presentation slots. We're now in the first one. And we have lunch, second round of lightning presentations, third round of lightning presentations. They're always 7 minutes long. I'll be ruthless about time. And then we have a quick round of Q&A. And so they're really only to kind of like give you a few bits and pieces for specific topics that we think are interesting to consider in this larger context. And after these 7 minutes lightning talks presentation, these 3 rounds, we're going to form working groups to explore collaborations on avenues for progress. And the working groups are basically going to be a melange of the lightning presentations, take those as a funnel that we will then draw working groups from. So they can be similar, but they can also be a mashup of like 3 lightning talks in one working group. We think that this intersection is like pretty fruitful, and we look forward to hearing what topics fall out of this afterwards. The idea here really is that we're trying to figure out how this intersection can really help civilization make progress on many of the ambitious goals that we may have. The working groups come with specific prompts. So who here knows the Heimeyer Catechism, more or less? Okay, cool, a few people, great. So basically, it's a few questions. I added one more, which is your name and participants. And it's basically a way to figure out, to explain what you are trying to do in terms of a project proposal in words that everyone can understand. And so you all have these specific questions. And in your working groups, basically think of your individual working groups as if you were going to do a project proposal that is trying to come up with an undervalued area at the intersection of cryptography, security, and AI that helps civilization flourish, answering these questions. So what would it actually mean to answer these questions? DARPA is using that, or has used it for some of their project proposals as well. And so that's a really good way to figure out, okay, is there a there? If we were trying to do this as a project, then what would it look like to take this seriously? There is a big interest in taking this seriously. We can talk a little bit more about that as well later on. But I think, I think those are really good questions to get quite concrete about figuring out how to make progress in this area. You have on your slides, on this page, a link here, which links you to this slide deck that I'm currently on. And we will ask you to submit a slide, basically, that answers these questions tomorrow by 12 p.m. after your working groups into the slide deck from which we will then present on. We will also send this out, but you always have access to the slide deck by following the link here. I will repeat all of this multiple times, but yes, we are very excited to get into working groups later. Cool. And tomorrow then, afternoon, we will have final working group presentations. And you basically have, again, 7 minutes to basically present if this new working group made a project proposal at the intersection of security, cryptography, security, and AI, then what would that look like? I'm going to repeat this. This will become much more fluid. Trust the process. We've done this in a few different areas before, and it's always I'm always like flabbergasted by the project proposals that fall out of 2 days of workshop. And yeah, we're really excited to have you on board for this. Cool. So in terms of like a few collaboration goals, I think that there's like 3 potential points. They're like lower hanging, middle hanging, and higher hanging fruit. Lower hanging fruit is really just like tech transfer across fields. So, I hope that those of you working in cryptography have a better understanding of what those in AI, those working in AI are actually doing all day long. And so I think that's a pretty low hanging goal of just having a better understanding what the other fields are working on. I don't think that any of you have time to keep up with all 3 fields. So we're hoping at least to have some tech transfer happen here. Second one is lasting interdisciplinary collaboration. So it's pretty common that, 5 years later, after some folks have come to a Foresight workshop, they're actually collaborating on a project together where someone just jumps in as an advisor to a specific project and helps them longer term. And then the higher hanging fruit are these project proposals. If we actually find specific paths that are potentially like novel, underfunded, undervalued and fundable, there is certainly an interest and appetite within the community to actually make those happen. And so I really welcome you to take this exercise seriously. I should also say that if you want to kind of like chat throughout the event, there is the Discord available for you guys. And that's a direct link. Please don't share this with anyone. Our Discord is usually application-based, and this one links you directly into it. And you can introduce yourselves in the introductions, and then the Intelligent Cooperation channel is where you can have conversations. Okay, wonderful. So that's in terms of a few goals. I think I've said more than enough about the format. Great. So then we can talk a little bit maybe about the intro. So I already said that we have these potential 3 kind of like, I guess at least, memory bridges that I want to encourage you to hold in your head as we move through the day. But to tell you a little bit more about like, why do we think this topic is useful to explore, I would love to kind of like switch gears now from the more explanatory stuff into a little bit more of a kind of like topic-oriented bits. So my kind of like intro presentation, where we really discuss a little bit more the topics. So you should have access to the book. There's also the physical book actually in the bag that you got, and on the shirts, we have a few more available here as well. And to just bring you maybe a little bit up to speed on why do we think this topic in particular is a useful topic to explore. Mark Miller, Christine Peterson, and myself, basically a little while ago, we're collaborating on a paper that we submitted to a risk conference that was on decentralized approaches to existential risk prevention. And so that's me. I'm Allison. I run Foresight now I've been with Foresight for 10 years. Christine, who many of you have met yesterday, has started Foresight 38 years ago. And Mark, I don't know, were you around for the inception of Foresight?
I was around from the beginning. I wasn't one of the founders, but I was around from the beginning for the space.
Great.
Beginning of the world.
Yes, obviously. Beginning of the world. And, I think Christine has really been there and has seen multiple technologies, basically all of the sections that I showed you. She's seen them kind of like come and go, having summers and winters, and has really thought deeply about like what would it mean to really steer technological progress forward. Mark is really like a pioneer in various different areas, and really in agoric, market-based, secure, distributed computing. There's a really wonderful documentary by Reason about the early cypherpunks, and Mark, you've also given one of my favorite talks, I think, really ever on the internet, which is Computer Security is the Future of Law. And you can see Mark and Nick Szabo, like I think it was like 20 years ago, like
1997.
1997, like really having a go at on smart contracts, like in the audience, and it's just really fun to see how what a long breath many of these technologies already had, and it's really must be really rewarding to see these coming about now. And so the three of us kind of band together, and we're like, okay, what would it look like to basically take these cryptographic and crypto commerce technologies, like Mark calls them, technologies seriously as kind of like an operating layer of civilization that can speed a lot of technological progress up that we care about, and many of you know that from DeSci and various other fields, but it can also prevent many of the risks that we care about strongly, and it can do so also in the context of AI. And so we wrote a paper, and then there was still a lot to say afterwards, and so we thought that we'd write a book. We wrote this through interviews. Basically, we sat together on the weekends, and this is still like a rather, I guess, like a technically focused book. We don't explain all of the concepts, but we still think that there's a there, and we invite you to kind of like give feedback and to take this like roughly as maybe somewhat of a potential guidance. Many of you, I should say, are in this book already, because we didn't write it in the way that I guess one would write normal books, but we basically invited many folks that we think are working on very critical parts of this technology stack to give a keynote seminar in our virtual program series. And so many of you came, gave a seminar, and then your ideas made it into the book. So thank you so much already for all the feedback and like wonderful ideas and technologies that made it here. And we're hoping that this book is more like a kind of collaborative process by which we give a few ideas, you contribute a few, and we're kind of like continuing to write it. That's the reason why it has a Substack version of the book, and that is here. Basically, if you follow this link, you will be directed to the Substack version that is kind of like taking this book a little bit more as a kind of iterated game. And there's already many of the videos and presentations in there, and we're hoping that it doesn't stop there. And so if you're interested in watching all of these videos, they're on there, and we're hoping that in the future we can contribute a few more to that. So in a nutshell, that book is rather unusual, and we think it's far from finished. So in a nutshell, really, what are we trying to do here over really the next few days? I think we kind of like start the book with this idea that values, or like that players of we treat civilization as an iterated game, that where we are basically just iterating in one part of this game, and the game is multiple. It's potentially pretty long if we do things right. And then we ask the question of like, what would it mean to play it well? And so for that, we kind of like first look at the players, which are all of you guys, really pretty much everyone who's playing the game of civilization. And the first chapter, or like chapter 3 here, really is all about trying to make the case that values differ, that we have value pluralism, and that it's not going to go away. And so that probably trying to like agree on one civilizational path moving forward is going to be pretty hard. And at the end of that chapter, we basically come to the kind of conclusion that rather than playing or than trying to agree on like one potentially like ethical strategy or something, what we should do is set up the playing field such that it enables voluntary cooperation. And so that basically means that it's consensual cooperation where people can opt out and can opt into cooperation. The idea here being that usually unlocks Pareto preferred interactions by which people are at least better off afterwards if they have the ability to consent into an agreement. We hear a little bit from Juan in a sec on like what that could look like to take this concept of Paretotopia seriously. Cool. So there's a few graphs on what we mean by that. In particular, if we think about what could it look like to cooperate with other intelligences, for them we really just don't know what they think and what they could want. But likely they have goals and they will have revealed preferences. And so at least we can take this concept of voluntary cooperation by which we can figure out how to cooperate with them better if we have the ability for them to kind of like consent into the interaction. And we talk a little bit also what does it even look like for machines to be able to do that. But after we set up voluntary cooperation as this kind of like meta strategy, we figure out how this has already shaped civilization. So we kind of like discuss the kind of like decrease in violence over time, and what it would look like now that humans have the ability to really consent into interactions much more so than before in history. We discover this like mechanism at work here, and then we figure out how this would look like in civilization ahead. And we really make the case that multipolarity and that having multiple actors holding each other in check is a good way to do this. We then discuss cooperation and how cooperation has evolved across civilization and all the wonderful institutions, including rights, contracts, prizes, and other institutions that have evolved to allow humans to cooperate much, much better on much larger scales over time. We discuss a few technologies of cooperation that can allow us to do that much better, in addition to like especially facing collective action problems, and then what it would look like to really move that ahead. And finally, we discuss what does it look like to do that much better with other intelligences in the mix. And here we basically call civilization at large a super intelligence that through enabling cooperation of individual participants gets much better at problem solving in a pretty decentralized way. And Juan will talk a little bit more about this mechanism that we're discussing here. But in a nutshell, we really kind of make the case for if we want the future to go well over time, we need to have some kind of mechanisms which allow different types of entities, whether they're computing entities or human entities, to cooperate better in this framework. And we discuss different types of parallels between institutions, computers, markets, and APIs, and trying to make a case for that there are really ways in which we can uphold these boundaries well. And so that's just the setup of like, you know, if you're interested, you know, we really invite you to read the chapters more, but like that is the kind of like a broad setup for why we are discussing these technologies, why we think they're important. Many of your technologies that you work on made it into chapter 5, where we discuss roughly, okay, if we think about these technologies of cooperation of info, money, rights, contracts, and privacy, how can we actually improve them using many of the crypto technologies that you're working on? We discuss better ways of doing information or speech. This is a prediction market that I think Robin came up with at one of our member gatherings quite some time ago. We discuss prediction markets and a few other concepts here. We discuss better ways to do property rights, better ways to do like the whole DeFi space and so forth. But in a nutshell, we're moving quickly to this notion of it would be wonderful to have better ways of actually creating more complex contracts. And here we go through different types of contracts, like split contracts that are half automated, half have a human in the loop, and so forth. And many, like we basically propose a few examples, just like of what do better tools like with which we can cooperate much better over time. And many of your the tools that you're working on are in here, and so maybe I'll point that out as you're presenting. Chapter 6 is all about, okay, we're not there yet, obviously, so what does it mean to peacefully move into this world from where we are currently, where most of the ways in which we interact are through legal contracts. So if you're interested more in like, okay, how can we actually move there? Chapter 6 is all about that. And then as we move more into thinking about how we can defend civilization, we basically make the case, and I invite you to also think about that perhaps a little bit, that there's two main traps in civilization that we need to kind of roughly figure out how to deal with. One will be the trap of technological progress, proliferating and allowing basically like a smaller and smaller set of actors to cause larger and larger harm. And so that is through biorisks, through AI, and through many of the other risks that we're also worried about. And then the other threat is the threat that I think is often a solution, which is in the face of technological progress, some of the solutions that are proposed are often this kind of like controlling, kind of like top-down regime that has an ultimate ability to surveil, monitor, and then enforce like security, whatever that means in a specific context. And so we basically say that like like technological threats are real. They're likely going to get larger over time. But on the other hand, most of the solutions, the standard solutions that are proposed, also come with their own risks, which are like, pretty unforeseen consequences that many of these more top-down solutions bear. And so we basically appeal to all of you guys to find decentralized defense solutions. And so that's really difficult. It's really hard, but I think we can maybe come up with a few. There are certainly a few in here, which is like encrypted surveillance. So like it's basically a monitoring regime that is encrypted and that relies on different actors monitoring each other, for example, for biorisk and other risks. But there's a lot more, and we need to, I think, we as a community need to come up with them, because otherwise we're going to have more top-down solutions. We make a few proposals here, but we invite you to really take this seriously. How can we defend civilization in a decentralized way? What would it look like to come up with specific technologies here? Because if we don't do it, we're going to get the default solutions, which I think come with a lot of risks as well. Cool. Then cybersecurity and cyber threats are, I think, a really big one that we also invite you to think about and take it seriously. We basically say that they are really undervalued in our current state. And we basically say that if we are worried about AI risk, we should really also be worried about computer security. And that's probably going to come much sooner. And it potentially is also, it could be catastrophic. We'll talk about that a little bit in a second with Mark, so I won't go into this now. But I think we should really take these risks rather seriously. And then finally, the big one, AI. So if we survive all of this, and if we figure out how we can incorporate better across humans, then we can tackle this problem of like, okay, what does it mean to include AI into the mix? And so I think the standard really and traditional way of looking at this is by treating AI as this potentially AGI potential singleton, like basically like one actor, or like a set of individuals that almost can operate as one actor that comes to power and is a super intelligence that maybe replaces the existing system and becomes the relevant intelligence. And then, the question is like, what would it look like to align this agent with human values? And we think this is really, really difficult. There's a few first strike instabilities, and value alignment is very, very hard. To first figure out what do humans ideally want, and then to try to port that into the context of one AGI singleton, and have that AGI singleton uphold these values stably over time in a predictable fashion is very difficult. And so we think that there may be a solution by having AI be more decentralized, having it incorporated into the fabric of civilization in this way. This is also obviously not easy. It's currently, at least I think the traditional, or I think the mainstream views that this is the less likely scenario in which we have this more decentralized approach to AI, in which AI actors are basically in a multipolar scenario and can hold each other in check. But I think that if any community can have good solutions on what would that look like if we had specific, very intelligent agents that would hold each other in check in a decentralized manner rather than one AI, then I think it's you guys that would have good ideas here. And so we invite you to start thinking about this as well throughout this workshop. We take inspiration from the US Constitution and how that works and how it could work across other intelligences, and we rely on a few principles here and make a few proposals, nevertheless fully knowing that that you guys probably have much better ideas here. Finally, I think something like a proposal that we make is more like a super intelligent human AI ecology. Mark and Eric Drexler wrote the Agoric Open Systems papers a while ago, and I think they still have a lot to offer here. But yeah, so this is on you guys. We're just making a few proposals here. We invite you to come up with better ones. I think if we do it well, and if we do get to a world by which we can figure out how we can cooperate in a secure fashion, not only with humans, but also with AIs in a roughly multipolar way, then I think we actually have a lot to look forward to. And I think in that case, really AIs are able to really steepen our Pareidotropian ascent as a civilization. Okay, so that's all a mouthful, but it's just to provide you with some rough kind of like concepts, ideas. If you are interested in any, there's much more in the book. But just like, why do we think these topics are important? Why do we think that they're in any way, in shape or form related? There's more in this book. I think, like, to me, the intersection of cryptography, security, and AI is still pretty undervalued. I think that if this community doesn't come up with great solutions for like secure ways in which humans and AIs can cooperate, I have less hope that other communities can do a better job at that. I think that there is really a there, and we really invite you to take that seriously over the next 2 days and figure it out. I think that currently many of the things we try to do with law, we could maybe already do with some technologies. And if that is the case, then we should really be a little bit more louder about these technologies, that there's still a few areas that are still significantly underfunded and undervalued, and we want to kind of point those out and see if we can get more progress happen at those intersections. So thanks everyone for joining for this. I'm very, very excited to see what you're all producing. I'm always here for questions, and that concludes my my introduction and my welcoming. And I would love to ask Mark on stage if we're going to go right into the second.